This video will be demonstrating the concepts that you've learned in Chapter 1. The scenario that we're going to use today is we're going to write a program that computes and displays the tips when the price of the meal and the tip percent is entered by the user. So let's go through and highlight some things in here. We're going to compute something, we're going to display it, which means that we're going to allow the user to see it. The user is going to enter the price of the meal, and they're going to enter the tip percent. So we have kind of four things that we're going to go through and use, and we can use those pieces within our algorithm. So this just kind of breaks down our scenario a little bit. So if we come into our algorithm, our first step will be we're going to ask the user to enter the price of the meal. Then we're going to ask the user, you can see here, what tip percentage they want. Then we're going to compute these. And to compute these, we're going to multiply the price of the meal by the tip. So we're going to do a calculation. So we're going to calculate the tip amount by multiplying the price of the meal by the tip percentage. Then we're going to display the tip amount to the user. So those are our four steps for our algorithm. The first step, we're going to ask the user for the price of the meal. You can see that's up here in yellow, so I'm just going to go ahead and change that to pink. Then we're going to ask the user for their tip percent. So I'm going to come up here to the scenario and change that to pink as well, because those two have been accounted for in our algorithm. We're going to compute the tip amount. So I'm going to go through and highlight that pink, which then relates to our step number 3. And the last step is we're going to display the tip amount to the user. So I'm going to change that last yellow to pink. So we have what we need from the scenario. So now I'm going to scroll on down. And based on our algorithm, I'm going to identify variables. So the first couple of things that I'm going to look for is where our user is entering information, because if our user is entering information, then we need a place to hold it, and the place to hold it is going to be the variable. So the first step in our algorithm is ask the user to enter the price of the meal. So I'm going to put meal price, if I could spell, and it's going to be a float data type because the meal price is not necessarily going to be a round number. And then the tip percent, and this is also going to be a float because we're going to ask the user to enter it in a decimal format. And then we're going to calculate the tip amount by multiplying the price of the tip by the meal percentage. I could put this in a variable, or I could just simply put it in the display. For this demo, I'm going to go through and I'm going to add a new variable, or I'm going to add another variable. And this again will be float, and this will hold the value of the meal price times the tip percent. Let me go ahead and put a T on that. That makes a little bit more sense. So we have 3 variables, 1 for the first step, 1 for the second step, and 1 for the third step. This scenario ends up so that you have 1 variable per the first 3 steps. Sometimes you may have multiple variables in a step. Sometimes you may have steps without any variables in them. That's just the way this one has ended up. So the formula that we're going to go through and we're going to use is going to be tip amount equals our meal price times the tip percentage. And we know that because that's step number 3. Multiply the meal price by the tip percent, so we have our formula down there. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit, get rid of the scenario. So what we need to do now is we need to go through and we need to do our test data. Our test data will consist of our input variables, our process and our formula, and our output, which is our expected results. So our input variables, here we have two input variables, one for the price of the meal, one for the tip percent. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new column, and then I'm going to shuffle my column widths around. I have my ruler on. If I go into view, ruler, it's turned on. So now my first input variable is going to be meal price. That's my first variable that I have in my variable list. So I'm going to say it's meal price, and then my next input variable is tip percent. Then my process or my formula, I have my formula right here, so I'm going to simply copy and paste. And then my output is my expected results. So we need 5 complete sets of test data. We want to make this test data a variety. So I'm going to start off with an easy one. They're going to enter in $10 at 15%. So this is going to be 10 times 0.15, and that will give me my tip amount of $1.50. The next one, I'm going to choose a higher number, so let's go with 125. My tip amount for this is going to be 20%, so I'm going to do 125 times 0.2. I can't seem to do that in my head, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my calculator, which is 125 times 0.2, and that's going to give me $25. So I'm going to come over here, and my expected results is $25. Now I'm going to do a small number, so let's do $2, and my tip percent on this is going to be 25%. So 2 times 25 should be 0.5, but let me double check it. 2 times 0.25 equals 0.5. All right. Now let's do a number with decimals. Remember, we want a variety of inputs, so we're going to put in $35.63, and we're going to put in an 18% tip. I definitely need my calculator for this. So 35 times 35.63 times 18%, which would give us $6.41. So 6.41. Let me go ahead and fill in my process. I jumped ahead there a little bit. And then my last one, let's do a small number with a decimal, and we'll do this at 12%. So this would be 5.75 times 0.12. So 5.75 times 0.12. And that gives me 69 cents, so 0.69. So now I finished my algorithm, my variables, my formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the screen, and then I will be right back. Okay, so now I have my algorithm. I've just copied and pasted it, and I put it over here on the left-hand side. It makes it a little bit easier to go through and to complete the pseudocode. So the first step in the pseudocode is to go through and to declare and initialize your variables. We have 3 variables up here: meal price, tip percent, and tip amount. So I'm going to come down into my pseudocode section. I'm just going to move everything in a little bit. And the keyword to declare variable is declare. You can use the caps or not. That's not important here. I'm just going to use it to emphasize it. So my first variable is meal price, and I'm going to set this up as a float. And then my second variable is tip percent, and this is also going to be a float. And then my last one is tip amount, and this one's also going to be as a float. So now I have 3 variables declared, and that matches with my 3 variables at the top. So now I'm going to come down a little bit in my pseudocode, and each variable has to be initialized. I'm going to initialize all of these to 0. If I do not initialize them, my system will initialize them for me, and I'm not really sure what value that they'll have, so I don't want to take anything to chance, so I'm going to go through and just initialize them. Typically, I set up all of my numerical values to 0, I set up my strings to null. So now that I have all of these declared and initialized, I'm going to come back over here to my algorithm. My first step in my algorithm is to ask the user for a meal price. Well, if I'm going to ask the user for something, I'm going to have two statements. The first statement is going to be to prompt them. So the keyword that I use to prompt or to display information to the user is a rate. So in here, I'm going to ask them to enter in the cost of their meal. So please enter the cost of your meal. In numerical format, you always want to make sure that you let the user know how you want the information. In numerical format, such as 10 for $10. End my quote. So I have my literal string there. And then to actually hold the value, I'm going to use my input keyword, and I want that value to be saved in my variable meal price. So I've completed this first statement over here. Now I'm going to move on to the second statement. Ask the user for tip percent. So I'm going to use the same keywords, write an input. In this case, I'm going to ask them for their tip amount. Please enter the tip percentage. In decimal format, such as 0.15 for 15%. And then I'm going to store this in my variable tip percent. And so now I have step 2 taken care of. Step 3 says calculate the tip amount by multiplying the price of the meal by the tip percent. Well, we have that up here in a formula. So if I scroll up just a little bit, I have my formulas, and I'm going to copy that whole thing, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to paste it in here. So what we're doing here is we're taking the value on the right-hand side, and we're going to store it in the variable on the left-hand side. The equal sign is the assignment statement, just like we used up here. So we're missing our keyword set. Again, it's taking everything on the right-hand side, storing it on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So now we finished step number 3 in our algorithm. The last step is to display the tip amount. So I could just write tip amount. But that doesn't make sense. And let me scroll up for my, so you can see my test data. And in here, if I just put in $1.50, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to the user. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to add some information around it to make the output easier for the user to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and add some information around it. The tip amount is, put a space after it, and then I'm going to put in the variable name. The variable names don't go in quotes. As soon as you put them in quotes, it's a literal string and it won't grab the value from the memory. It'll just literally display TIPAMT. So the tip amount is, and I'm just going to make it a little bit more robust, the tip amount is based on your meal price of and tip percentage of. So what will happen is when all this comes together, I'm going to scroll up so we can just see the first line of our input. The tip amount is 1.5 based on the meal price of $10 and the tip percent of 15%. So now that I have my algorithm done, because I finished the last step over here, I'm going to move on to Raptor. So for Raptor, so I would just organize this where I have my pseudocode on the left-hand side and my Raptor on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to focus on my pseudocode right now. My declare and my set statements go together into one symbol in Raptor. The symbol is my assignment symbol. And what I'm going to do here is, as soon as I double click on it, it edits that symbol. The first text box is my variable name. So my variable is meal price. And I'm going to assign it a value of 0. So I'm just going to put a 0 in there. Click on done. So I finished those two. And then I'm going to come down to my next one, which my variable is tip percent. So it's TIP, PRCT. And I'm going to also assign that as 0. So I'm done with that. And my very last variable is tip amount. And I'm going to assign that as 0. So I've taken care of these 6 statements right here. 3 symbols, 6 statements, we're all good to go. The next 2 I'm going to take together as well. I have my prompt for my user, and then I have my variable. All of these are asking them to enter in something, so I'm going to use my input symbol in Raptor. Double click on that, and it's going to ask me for my prompt. I'm going to take everything from Word and I'm going to copy and paste except for my quotes. Raptor does not like the quotes. I'll show you on the next one why. And then my variable is going to be meal price. So I've entered my prompt, which is everything from my right statement, and meal price, which is my variable. You'll notice I have never entered any of the keywords from my pseudocode. Using the symbols in Raptor assumes the functionality of those keywords. So now I have another input, and from here I'll show you what happens when you actually put in the quotes from Word that are smart quotes. So I'm going to copy them all, and I'm going to put in my variable name, which is tip percent, and I'm going to click on done, and it tells me that we have unexpected ID. So I'm going to come back up to the top, and I'm going to change my first and my last quotes. And now it's all happy. It asked me to save it. I can go ahead and save it. So I finished these next 2 statements as well. My next statement is assignment statement, because remember, I'm assigning the value on the right to the variable on the left. So I'm going to use my assignment symbol. I'm going to come over here. In this case, I'm going to set tip amount, and this is going to be equal to meal price times tip percent. The value on the left is the first text box. The values or formulas that are on the right of the equal sign go into the second text box. And my last statement is a write statement. My write statement in this case, because it does not go with the input statement, it goes all by itself, I'm going to use my output symbol. My output symbol has the arrow on the right hand side. My input symbol has the arrows on the left hand side. So if I double click on this, you will also notice that the output only has 1 text box. The input has 2. In this case, I'm going to copy everything, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change my quotes so that Raptor is happy. Remember, the first thing that I want you to do if you get an error in Raptor when dealing with a prompt or an output is go back and look at your quotes. So now I have everything in here. I have all of my statements from my pseudocode. So now I'm going to remove the highlight and come back up to my test data. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to run this. So I'm going to click on my run symbol in Raptor, and it says please enter the cost of your meal in numerical format such as 10 for $10. So I'm going to enter 10 here. Click on OK. Please enter the tip percentage in decimal format such as 0.15 for 15%. So I'm going to enter in 0.15 and click on OK. It tells me it's complete. The tip amount is 1.5 based on your meal price of 10 and tip percentage of such and such. Well, I can make that probably a little bit better. So I'm going to go in here into my output, and I'm going to put a dollar symbol before the tip amount and a dollar symbol before the meal price. This is done within the quotes because it becomes a literal string. And now when I use my second set of test data, and I go through and I run this, it asks me for my my cost of my meal, so it's 25, and I'm going to put in 0.1 for the tip percentage, and now the tip amount is $2.50, which matches my result based on the meal price of 25 and tip percent of 0.1. You can see this is a little bit easier to read than the above. I know some of you aren't going to like all these extra decimal places down here. Don't worry about it. When we continue on through class, you'll learn how to go through and clean that up. So that's 2 test data runs. So now I'm going to run my third one, and that's 536 at 18%. And it should give me $96.48, which it does. I'm going to run it one more time, or for my fourth one, which is 549 at 25%. It should give me $1.37, and it does. Again, don't worry about this extra. And my last one is $20.36 at 20%, and this gives me $4.07. Don't worry about the 2 and the 0. So it looks like that my Raptor works just fine. So now I want to move this over into my design document. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to place my cursor, come back into Raptor, and do File, Print to Clipboard. It says please open MS Word. I already have it open. And then I'm going to paste it into it. So I'm going to come over here into Word and paste it. I will minimize Raptor, and I will maximize my design document. I'm just going to look through it real quick. I have my flowchart, I have my pseudocode, my test data, formulas, variables, algorithm. So I look like I'm in pretty good shape. Oh, I didn't put my name on it. So let me go through and make sure I put my name. Life is good. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'm done with the demo for Chapter 1. If you have any questions on this, please post them on the discussion board or ask your instructor. Thank you.